We're here at youme Gallery on James Street North in Hamilton, Ontario, for the solo exhibition of Brian Kelly, which consists of sculptures and these awesome quotes on the wall, which we're going to talk about in a second. Hi, Brian.
Hello, Chris. Good morning.
Good morning. As soon as I walk in here, it's like an impression of sort of a crazy, sort of maybe scientist or craftsman, sort of like laboratory or tool shed, in a sense. And then I was looking at them more, and they're very sympathetic, sort of almost creatures or movements or little characters to me. There's a lot of personality in each one, and I could spend a lot of time with each one looking at it and relating it to the quote on the wall beside it. Can you tell us a little bit about your process for making your work?
Well, I think it all started, I don't know if it all started, but I think the germ for the way I look at most things is a single quote that I heard when I was at art college. And my photo instructor at the time, Paul Mockler, said, you take a cabbage and then you take a radio. And separately, they don't seem to relate. But if you take a photograph of them together, they kind of develop a relationship.
Okay.
And I think that has a lot to do with these ones, too. They may end up looking a certain way, but what they tend to be is just one found object that kind of relates to another found object. They don't immediately attach to each other, kind of aesthetically. But you find a piece, and then eventually you find a piece that has a relationship with it, and then they go together. It's kind of like the trailer for Transformers, where they suck up great bits of metal, you know? and inevitably or eventually, they tend to have a recognizable relationship that tends to be somewhat relaxed, or people find, I guess, a visual comfort to them for some people.
So it's kind of the Gestaltian theory, where the proximity of something creates the relationship between the objects, but it's not random, because there's an artist in the process. This is not some sort of random algorithm. You're choosing these and you're putting them together. Yeah,
in the fact that if I take one piece in one hand and one piece in the other hand and I hold them up, I decide for myself whether they have any relationship.
Okay.
And if they don't, they go back in the pile. And if they do, they're attached. They're put together to make the beginning or an element in one particular piece.
And I know this is sort of like Michelangelo cliche question, but are the pieces informing you of what they're going to be, or do you have a preconceived notion of what you're trying to, for each one?
I suppose I could be honest and say that if I see a void in a piece or a void in the process, then I look for something to fill that void.
Okay.
So I'm looking for a specific piece with a color, a shape, a patina. So I'm not saying that the entire process, it tends to be making decisions about whether one relates to another. But that's the majority of the process for me. I fill in the voids, the cracks in my kind of understanding how my sculpture works by making specific decisions and looking for specific shapes or objects or ideas to complete a piece.
So taking a step outside of the studio, when you're collecting your materials from the community and stuff. So I mean, is there do you go on set sort of sorties to collect some of this stuff, which I mean, it's some of this, I mean, individually people would ignore, and then you sort of collect it and then imbibe it with purpose and via proximity and your choices.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, what is your process for collecting the raw materials?
I think that the piece is interesting. I know that with potters and when they work with glazes, they're looking for a specific surface. And there are certain recipes for glazes that will give you that surface. Okay. And for me, that tends to be a redundant process, but because you go looking for a piece that has that surface, that it's developed itself by being discarded, by being allowed to become itself, I suppose, to continue its narrative. As the designer of Christmas gifts, Philip Stark, says, you know, everybody have a poetry, everybody has a narrative. And I try to catch the narrative of these specific pieces if they relate to a piece I'm working on, or if I'm looking for a piece specifically, if I have an idea in my mind of how a piece is supposed to look, I'll actually go looking for it. I was looking for some metal strapping a couple of weeks ago to finish off one of the structures I was working on, and I went out specifically to a number of different areas looking for where I might find them. I guess it's like a naturalist, you know. If you want to find a duck, you go to water.
Right.
So if you want to find a piece of strapping, you go to a construction site. So,
and our environment that we live and work in is just as legitimate environment as any other that you're collecting materials from.
well, I think so.
Okay, yeah.
But it's not the environment so much; it's the materials wherever you find them. That's important.
And so that's interesting. The abandonment of an object is its liberation, in a sense. It doesn't become what it is until it's...
Well, a few years ago, I went through a peculiar time where I dealt specifically with abandonment myself. I was abandoned by somebody. And I don't think there was kind of a lighter side to it. There wasn't a heroic to it, that it was just a matter that something's been discarded, as our society does with just about everything.
Right, yeah.
I mean, I'm not a Luddite. I like new technology, but I like to be able to maintain a connection with the things that kind of tell our story.
And this is so this series of work has really developed over the last few years. And
A bit longer. Sometimes I'll make a piece and the piece gets tired.
okay,
Aesthetically tired, so I'll disassemble it and take the pieces. I may take it apart to its individual elements, or I may take off like different motifs from it, different pieces, different parts of it, and then start another piece. It's, I guess, like planting potatoes. You take an old potato and you cut one of the eyes off and stick it in the ground, and you grow another potatoes.
yeah, that's a good way. Some people concentrating so much on one piece that they kind of miss the forest going on.
And I'm not arrogant enough to think that the work I do is really significant, you know, that everything's that precious. So I shouldn't feel a slight bit reticent about taking it apart and using it for something else.
Well, I always thought that kind of attitude is more in tune with real imagination than sort of being a super literal person would never touch their art again or never destroy it because it's so precious and real.
Well, this may be a different focus. It may not be. Thank you for saying that. But I don't look at it in such a grand way. They tend to be really humble objects, and they end up being humble objects as far as I'm concerned.
Well, speaking of these humble objects, so we'll just finish off with a couple of questions. This, do you see relationship? I mean, do you see these as figures, as or any sort of relation to music or movement?
I build them when it's quiet or when there's music playing. I build them when I'm listening to traffic noises. I really don't think there's any relationship to the environment around me. It's just kind of it's really to the process, I think, more than anything else.
Okay, yeah, just a lot of movement in each work.
I think that kind of relates to the pieces that I use rather than kind of an intent on making the piece look like it's animated.
Okay.
If you use a narrow piece, it tends to have a different understanding than a bulky piece or something with volume.
Now, the other aspect of your works are really, I have to ask you about is you're using something called commercial enamel.
Yeah.
And this stuff just seems to suck the light in from around it. It's like this super flat kind of...
yeah, it's the iron oxide trem-clad spray paint you buy at Canadian Tire.
Okay.
You know, the working man's art supply store, Canadian Tire. And I like the patina, and I like the color. There's a new the piece here that tends to be slightly more brown than red than the original recipe.
Okay.
And that was Canadian Tire had a larger tin. I worked out the price of buying a tin of the standard size aerosol tin and a larger tin. That one was cheaper, so I bought it, but it doesn't have the same color. It's not as red. And patinas I find a bit odd too, so I may never use that again. But the commercial enamel is just the fact that it's available. It's kind of like a generic term for something that people put out on Big Garbage Day, and there tends to be a small bit of enamel left in the bottom of the tin before the fellow picks it up and throws it in the back of the packer.
Yeah, it's just some of the discarded objects, or using found objects, I should say. Sometimes there's a texture from exposure,
Yeah.
And you've chosen parts to opaque that out with the commercial enamel, which I found really interesting.
Yeah, and it kind of gives you a uniform surface too.
Okay.
If I may not find the original in quotation marks, the original surface that I find. I may not find that works with another piece, or that two pieces. I feel fate suggested they would be one piece, and to make them appear more like one piece, I make them all the same color or all the same texture. So it could be two separate pieces with two separate patinas, and I'll join them to make one piece. So it becomes one piece with one patina.
Brian, thank you very much. This is a really lovely show. It's on till December 4th, 2012.
I think that's what, December 4th.
So I highly recommend it as art to see this weekend.
Well,
Thanks very much. Bye.
You.